What's going on, everybody? We're live. We want to go ahead and get this rolling. Ryan is joining us.
We woke him up early. Okay.
Yeah, we woke up early.
It's West Coast. He'll be here in like a minute.
Yeah.
You know how those West Coast, he's probably stuck in traffic. I get it.
From the bedroom to the office.
There's traffic everywhere in California.
There it is.
I was there.
There he is. The man, the myth, the legend, the black box.
Yeah, apparently I'm just trying to get my weird. It's like my little camera light is on, but I'm not showing up.
Have you tried turning off your computer, Ryan, and turning it back on?
Yeah, or blowing into the cartridge.
No worries. I actually was gonna say I might have to do that. Is like
go ahead.
Restart. Go ahead. Okay, all right. It's probably better to see me, so I apologize.
Yeah,
probably.
You're catching me right in the morning, so
rise and shine.
Things don't work. Yes, exactly. I will be right back.
I will happily mess my hair up if it makes.
Yeah, well, I'll mess my hair. I'll mess my hair up.
No, I woke up looking good. What, right?
Yeah, we think so. You look great, to be honest.
Black box is fantastic. Hey, everybody, if you are watching, we are figuring out computer things, even though Ryan is in technology.
Yeah.
That we're still trying to figure things out. So again, if you have any questions for Ryan now, go ahead and add us comment. We're very excited to come to you this morning live. We already got some people trickling in. Jordan goes, take the
Yeah, that's it.
I love that. Kathia, good morning.
I love when you talk dirty to us, Jordan. Yeah.
We're very excited to have you all here. We want to go ahead and go live. Ryan is joining us in a second, working out some technical difficulties. But again, we're going to talk about leadership and Ryan's journey within Netflix. And so if you have any questions about Netflix culture or leadership and how they do things, please go ahead and add us, comment. We'll save.
Yep.
And we'll go from there. But again, Ryan will join us here in a minute. We want to go ahead and live now to let you know
that it's coming.
This is happening.
Hey, what's been your favorite Netflix thing to ever binge while we're waiting?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Ever binge?
Thanks.
Ever binge?
Besides like The Office.
Stranger Things is like my thing.
Stranger Things was it actually eclipsed The Office for me.
Really? Okay.
Stranger Things eclipsed The Office?
Which I felt like was impossible.
Interesting. Okay.
We have a few more people tuning in. John, what's going on, man? Danny, good morning. My old guitar player from South Carolina.
Man.
Now a data scientist up in New York. What's up, buddy? Andrew, yes. Have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again? I said the same thing because I am in tech. Aaron, thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Coming in hot from Newland Poiling. Congrats, man. Congrats on the job. Good morning. What's going on? My dad is tuning in, so I better.
Yes.
Dave Destin in the house. Babylon Berlin. Does anybody know about that?
No.
That's where he is.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Peaky Blinders.
Work. Yeah.
Peaky Blinders. I haven't seen.
Oh man, it's so good.
Is it?
Yeah, it's really, really freaking good. Now, do not be deceived. You cannot pull off a driver's cap just simply because you watched Peaky Blinders.
I will never.
Everyone pulls it off, but
I will never do that.
It's not the same. I fell victim to it. I was like, oh, I could totally wear one of those. That sounds awesome. I can't do it.
Danny, Dave, Destin in the house. I love it. Miguel, good morning. What's going on?
Miguel, hey, that's one of our leads. Vico built. Hey.
Back in my day.
Yeah, same. So I first got Netflix when I was in college, and there was 4 of us in my apartment. We would gather around, come up with our queue, get a video, figure out whenever we were all in, but I had access to it. So every once in a while, I'd sneak a Dan Thompson choice in there. Not a big deal.
Dan, what did you say you binged on with Netflix?
I don't. So obviously, The Office. Everybody watched The Office. I'm trying to think. Stranger Things was good. I'll tell you. Have you guys ever watched a show and then you got just so far along that you're just like, I have to do this whether you like it or not? That's how I got with Orange Is the New Black. I got through like 4 seasons of it, and I was just like, man, like this isn't that good anymore. But like, here we are, like 48 hours of my actual life like into this. So I just had to keep going.
That's how I felt about Lost back in the day.
Yeah, I can see that.
Up till season 3.5 was absolutely incredible, and then I was like, I don't know what's going on anymore.
So while Ryan is still trying to get back on, let's do some quick intros about each other, so that way we don't have to like intro us all when Ryan gets on. So Jake, well, first off, for those of you who are watching, because we have quite a few people that are watching right now, so hopefully Ryan can get back on here very soon. But if you are new to the whole Unicorn Finders thing, Jake, Dan, and I, this spawned out of the fact that we were lonely. This spawned out of the fact that we were, hey, there's Ryan. Here we go.
What's up?
So sorry about that, you guys. Wow.
No, you're good. We have the most viewers we've ever had. So we've had my dad and one other person. So like everyone's just super jacked.
Well, I didn't know it was live too, so now I'm even like more panicked. I was like, "Oh goodness, I need to like really like rip around trying to like get things to work." I'm like not even on the monitor now. I'm like, "All right, like this is it." Of course, and it took the longest time to restart.
Listen, you sound good, you look good, and we're just thankful that you enjoyed. You're talking to 3 random strangers
I love it.
on a Thursday morning. So for everybody, so we'll go and kick it off. So again, this podcast, Unicorn Finders, was spawned out of the fact that Jake, Dane, and I were lonely, and we were all best friends at the start of the pandemic in March of last year. So what did we decide to do? We decided to create this bad boy to find and uncover people doing unicorn-like things in tech. And so I have followed Ryan from afar on Twitter. I've been very impressed with his cadence around leadership, around giving back to the community. And we have some mutual connections. So I slid into Ryan's DMs. And I said, "Hey, Ryan, you up?" And basically, here he is. So, Ryan, thank you for joining us today live. And thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Ryan, I've got a question. Hold on. Are you from the Great White North?
I am. You already hear that? That's pretty impressive.
Are you from like Winnipeg, Manitoba, that area?
Yes.
What?
I played hockey for my entire life. You just pick up these things, you know?
Yeah, so did I, but dadgum, dude.
That's pretty good.
Dan, that's pretty impressive. I grew up in Manitoba, lived in Toronto before moving to the Bay Area. I've been in the Bay Area for 8 years now.
Yeah.
But of course the accent doesn't go away. Well,
I love it, man. I'm jealous.
It's probably lost a little bit.
Sorry, I interrupted. Taking this off board. Sorry.
So let's go ahead and dive in.
Right there.
So let's go ahead and dive in. Ryan, give us an introduction about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And then we'll go ahead and dive into specific questions around leadership.
Right on. Well, as Dan started off, I'm originally from Canada, which is great. I'm Ryan Burgess. I'm a software engineering manager at Netflix. Been at Netflix for almost 6 years now. I just actually transitioned to a new team. I was leading the acquisition UI team, they still are responsible, but they're responsible for all the sign-up flows, onboarding, payments, everything of Netflix builds that across all the UIs for iOS, Android, web, and TV. My new team is that I'm leading is in productivity engineering. I'm leading an infrastructure and tools team that we're responsible really for helping all the teams at Netflix in engineering to be more productive, I guess is the easiest way to say that. So building better tooling or infrastructure that makes things run a lot smoother. So I've been in that role for about a month now. So I'm still learning, which is kind of cool. It's like I feel like I'm starting a new job, it's great.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
And
we had to borrow some tools from that team for a project we did last year, actually, with you guys.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Ryan,
Taylor.
you have a podcast too, right?
Yeah. So I have a front end podcast. It's I'd say engineering, and then it also covers like careers and everything like that. But it's a front end happy hour. It's like all of you. We have a panel that we actually sit around and have some alcohol beverages while we record, and we talk about engineering, which is really good.
That's awesome. Good. Well, it's still early, so mine's just coffee. But
that's fair.
I'm like, afternoon.
And we have done some where we've, because of the pandemic, I love that you all started this during the pandemic. We've been doing this for like 5 years now, we had never done a remote call. Like it had always been literally sitting around a table all together in the same room. And so now we're doing a few more guests that are, could be in Europe. And so we have had a couple where it's like first thing in the morning for the guest, or is it for us? I can't remember. But I was like, yeah, we're probably not going to be having too much drinks at that point in time.
Well, I mean, you know,
It's heavy. Hey, there is no rules.
I mean, if you're gonna start, if you're going into work like that same day, like which I will be doing shortly, it's like maybe not. Yeah.
So Ryan, before we dive in, what's your hard stop? So I want to be respectful to you.
How long do you guys usually go for?
6 hours.
Well,
I said 9.
Stop before that. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we can shoot for about 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and dive in. I mean, Ryan, one of the reasons why I DM'd you is because of just your involvement on Twitter and your thoughts around leadership and culture. And so I know Netflix as a whole, as an organization, obviously is known for their culture. So I wanted to kind of ask you, can you give us a little peel behind the onion, as people say, around what does it look like? Some people say peel behind the onion. I say peel behind the onion.
I don't think anybody says that.
I say peel behind the onion. That doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point of the matter is
the hood.
Please stop. Can you go over a little bit of Netflix culture and then talk about a little bit of culture that you've maybe taken from Netflix and also kind of done a little Ryan spin on it within your teams? I'm interested to kind of just start there.
Yeah, I mean, the Netflix culture is really unique. I mean, it's available online and it's been available for forever that I remember. Like once it was created, they decided to broadcast it. And of course, there's even books about it, which is really cool. But the whole concept and idea is like freedom and responsibility. And that can mean a lot of things, just saying that. But you really have a lot of freedom to do what you think is best for Netflix. And there's the responsibility aspect, but the responsibility part of that is like, how do you do it responsibly, right? Like and no one's telling you exactly how that's done. But like, I'm going to show up to work. That's probably a responsible thing to do, but there's not necessarily like set hours that I necessarily have to be there. It's like, am I delivering my work? Am I doing the right things? And so it's a really good rubric. You'll hear it so many times. Like people will kind of just reference that freedom and responsibility. And like, that's the decision-making rubric a lot of times, which is really cool. How it shows up for me, like I've really enjoyed it. I mean, I've never stayed at a company almost 6 years. Like that's a long time for me. Usually I'm like 1-2 years and I need a new challenge. But I felt like the culture's been really great. And also I'm still constantly challenged within the roles that I've been in, which is cool. But how it shows up for me as a leader, I like to give people like space to make their decisions, right? Like I'm not top down, which I love. I don't want to micromanage. And so the culture helps all this too, which is really good. And so you're there as a support, like how can I help things? How can I make sure we're doing the right things, share the right context so that people are able to make decisions? When it comes to engineering, if you think about, sometimes you've had like probably in the past, I know I have, is like a PM or whoever it is, like I've seen like PMs and designers bring something to engineering, here's the spec, go build it. That's not the case here. It's a lot more collaborative of like, what's the right thing for the business? Like, what are we doing? Like, and everyone's kind of coming at it from that angle, which is really cool. So that's kind of a high level of my thoughts on it, but I'm happy to kind of go further in if you have more questions.
Yeah. So obviously, Netflix does have an incredible, culture, the way that they, write about it, the way that they've kind of enumerated what makes up that culture. But a lot of those things, as much as they talk about, no sink or swim behaviors tolerated, no cutthroat behaviors, tolerated, but also how competitive of an environment is, and that you have to hire smartly and cut smartly at times. How do you go about when you're interviewing or when you guys are deciding to grow, of determining what characteristics people have and what kind of questions do you ask to make sure that people fit that culture of being competitive, but not being, like backstabbing type of folks?
Ooh, good call on that too. Is that's not something that happens to, like, it's super weird. And I'm sure it's like, there's snippets of it that have happened. Like, don't get me wrong, like culture, even reading the culture, people often ask me like, how true is it? I mean, I asked that question when I was joining. I read the culture. I was like, whoa, I love this, but like, how true is that?
Right.
And I always say like 85, 90% true, because, you know, nothing can be perfect, but it is very on point. And one of the things that I love about it is it's not very, like, it's not cutthroat. And a lot of people think that, like, externally, or even reading the deck, like, people are like,
Yeah.
ooh, like, people are going to be like fighting each other to get on top, or, you know, the whole high performance. I don't see that. People are so like thankful to help each other, and like there's not this competitiveness with each other at all. It's like, how do I get better? But it's not to like throw the next person under the bus or anything like that. And so it removes a lot of the political aspect that I've seen in companies in past roles. So very weird, but it happens, which is really cool.
How do you?
But
sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I think you had asked about sussing it out, right?
Yeah.
Dan, in like an interview. It's not easy, especially with anything culture. It's not something that you can just ask one or two questions and, you know, there's a right or wrong answer. There is not. It's really judgment. But a big part of the interview, no matter what role you're in, is going to be like sussing out that culture aspect. But it's not. They're not tricks. They're not anything like that. It's just really, it kind of goes both ways too, right? If it's not the right fit for someone, they don't think the culture is going to work for them. Like, there's a lot of ambiguity when you're working in this. Like, it's not spelled out for you. Like, here, go do these things and you'll be successful. There's a lot of ambiguity. And if you can't work in ambiguity, that's not probably going to work, and it's not going to be successful on either part. But you find the right people who are excited about that and also want to have more ownership and do that, and it ends up working out. But there's not a perfect question. I wish I could give that would be helpful.
If you're from a how does prioritization happen then? If everyone kind of has the authority to make something better, how do you prioritize and make sure that you're executing on those, and how do you tie break too when you have competing interests?
Good question. And because you're right, like there's still got to be some sort of like informed captain, right? Like, and that will be it too, is sometimes like there's some sort of informed captain. When I think about like working closely with the PM, they should be it. Like, but they're not coming in and saying, this is how we're going to do something, because they want to make, not because they're trying to bring everyone and just give everyone a voice. It's just more because I think that's a better way of approaching it, is allowing people the space to understand what we're trying to solve and then figure out how do we do that. Like, if it's, you know, bring more people to the sign up flow of Netflix, like that's a broad thing, but like, how do we do that? And like, rather than having a plan for everyone, it's like bring them along that journey and coming up with ideas. Or if you're hitting maybe a blip in the plan, it's like, here's a couple paths we could take. Most times the team is kind of all on the same page, but if there was a disagreement or a misunderstanding, let's look to the informed captain. If that's the PM or whoever that is, they can make a decision, and we're all like, all right, let's go forward, if that kind of makes sense. But yeah, it's not like we're running in chaos, just being like, I'm working on this today and then running over here. You're being thoughtful. You're being the responsible part, is like you're bringing people along that journey, getting input and feedback on like, is this the right thing? Just because I think it's the right thing, I might want to do it, but like also like get input from it too.
I love that. So Ryan, one thing, and also for everybody who's still watching, which is holding strong, I love it. We've had 3 people now. Just kidding. Ask questions, add us, comment. We're going to have Q&A with Ryan here for the last about 15 minutes. So if you have questions to Ryan or about Netflix, please add us, comment. We'll throw it up in the chat. We'll start doing it now and work it into our conversation. So Ryan, I'm always fascinated because we've had some, you know, pretty cool people on the pod and talking about leadership styles. And I've been really big on kind of, you know, self-reflecting for myself. It's like, where do I pull leadership styles from? Right. And so I'm curious for you, right, as somebody in tech, because we can get into a whole nother conversation about leadership in tech and how it's, you know, it's flawed and some people don't want to be leaders and they're forced to be leaders and all that jazz. Right. But I'm curious for you, where do you pull your leadership from? Like what principles, like are there people that like you read, right? Do you read about principles that you bring on and kind of implement on your own? Do you listen to people? Like, who are your kind of your influences?
Ooh, that's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
That is
Write
a good
these down.
question.
Yeah, I am writing
No
them down.
pressure.
That's why I asked. Listen, we do this podcast, so I can just cheat off everybody else's paper.
I mean, you do learn, like, by
Same.
doing podcasts, like, you learn a lot. Like, you're literally getting to talk with people. It's such a fun topic. Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, okay. I mean, I look to other leaders. Don't get me wrong. There's people at Netflix that you start to resonate with their style. You're like, I really like how this person operates, and you might grab time with them to ask them, like, how they think about leadership or how they approach it. But it's also, like, sometimes just being, like, around them, right? Like, you start to see how they interact and things like that, which that has helped me a lot. Reading, oh my goodness, like, reading is so important. Like, reading, listening to podcasts, like, getting other viewpoints, because you're dealing with situations that aren't very like what we're used to in, an engineering world. Some of the problems are pretty binary, but like I said, even in those interview questions for culture, there's could be a million answers that are technically right, and everyone kind of comes at the problems differently. But also, some of the problems you're dealing with as a leader, there's no playbook for it. There's nothing that you can follow. So it's really always like sussing out and getting different input and feedback, and figuring out how someone else would do it. But yes, I definitely have people that I look to as, I respect and will want to learn from them. I get advice from them. Peers too. Like, oh my goodness, like, running by peers that you're like, hey, how would you deal with this situation?
Yeah.
And getting input from them is so valuable.
Yeah. Some of the peers, I mean, yourself included, at Netflix as an organization has got to be just out of control, from that access.
Yeah. I mean, it is, but it's like, yeah. And I think, like, there, even sometimes you ask someone who's, like, you think is, like, the strongest leader, and they've probably dealt with all the things. You might be bringing a unique problem to them, and they're like, wow. And so I think you learn that way too. Like, I have people coming to me like, how would you deal with this, Ryan? And I'm like, oh, wow, that's, interesting. And so I'm even learning as I'm speaking through it. And now it's prepared me if I come into a similar situation. I've already kind of thought about it and hadn't really thought about it before, but because of nature, someone else brought that problem to me. I'm like, wow, and I've got to prepare and think about that.
That's so good. I did have, as that, that culture permeates, if we're still on the Netflix culture just a little bit, I'm going to go back to it, but is it something that could be injected into a different company culture, or did it have to be built from the ground up? Like, could you go back to Evernote, which was a great company, I'm sure, there are a lot of great things, great tools, and go in there and just be like, freedom and responsibility, go, and this, like, or is it something that really had to be ingrained from the beginning of the company?
And I don't know that it was ingrained. And sorry, like, I can't even remember all the exact history, because that was long before my time at Netflix.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it necessarily has to be from, like, day one that you have this set and plan. And that definitely wasn't the case with Netflix. But with any culture, regardless if it's like the freedom responsibility aspect that Netflix has, it takes time to shift. Like, you're asking people to, like, rethink and relearn on how they operate. Even if it was our culture or any other culture, it takes time. Like, even if you just introduce, like, a new process in your company, and people are like, they got to wrap their heads around it. It's not like they're just like, wow, like, we went from waterfall to agile. It's like, we're just gonna hit the ground running. I read a book on it. We're good. It takes time, and you have to shift people thinking around that and make sure they understand it, make sure they're bought in. I mean, not everyone's bought in at first, like, on any of those changes. If you went from one way of doing something like agile to the next, it's like, it takes time, and it's going to take repeating that and building that muscle up. And so I just don't think I think you can throw it at a company and try and adopt it, but it's going to take time and also take patience around that.
How do you kind of empower people to have that? We talked about this actually on our live yesterday, getting over the fear of rejection or being able to be vulnerable enough to ask or to speak up in something with that. Is it just the people you hire are just happen to all be, I'm confident in my ideas, or is it something that is having to encourage them frequently or kind of pull some of that out of people to get them ramped up on that culture?
Yeah, same as if you tried to inject this culture, it takes time to learn, right? So there's people who are joining who it's like this is new, and so how do they learn that? Well, it's like they're getting exposed to it, and they're maybe there is a bit of coaching. Like if they're reporting to me, like I might suggest certain things or be like, oh yeah, no, you should totally run with that, and like here's how I've approached it. But encouraging those types of things and behavior, but it takes time to learn and build that up. Like I know when I started, it wasn't something, even though I was totally bought in, I read it and I'm like, yes, this is the greatest thing ever. It's not like I hit day one, was like, I know what I'm doing. This is super straightforward. It's like, you have to like build that muscle. It's like going to the gym, just thinking you can lift like 250 pounds, like right off the bat. It's like, no, you build your way up to it.
I can do that.
Yeah, I walk around
like,
every day, so
I'm sure you all it's just like on the shoulders. It's
Hey, Ryan, want to ask you, and this goes back to, and I don't want to forget his name, Ben Thomas, pardon me, from the chat asked this question as well. I know something I was thinking. Obviously, culture is very, very important to Netflix in terms of what you guys, preach and how you hire. But a lot of that is permeated by being around people and learning from others and being in an office setting together. Yeah. How has the pandemic and you guys working remotely kind of change that, or how do you guys make sure that continues to be a culture, especially when bringing new people in, that they feel that and feel that empowerment and belonging in that culture rather than just, another cog in the wheel?
Yeah. I mean, you've kind of built the muscle around like a culture. That's that's like something that's been running and throughout the company. And so you understand how to like bring people into that. But yeah, throwing in a pandemic and throwing in like now everyone being remote, it's hard. Like that was something even for me. I had fortunate enough, I did hire someone. We had made the offer. They've signed everything. They're joining. I think the date was like the end of March, and this was all like signed and detailed before the pandemic. Then the pandemic hits and you're like, great, I have this person who's starting remote. And I panicked. Like I didn't feel like equipped to like, how am I onboarding this person? Like I've onboarded people many, many times, but like, this is new to me. And I kept feeling like I wasn't doing a good service for this person either, just because it's new and you worry, like starting someone in a new job, like it's hard being a new person, right? Like in a new role, there's so much to learn. I always think like I can do better and better on an onboarding situation, even throughout my time. But throw in that remote and throw in the pandemic where you're like dealing with who knows what. Like it's not even just that we're like, oh, we're just now remote. It's like, no, you're also dealing maybe with childcare, or you're dealing with like other outside factors, that sick family members, who knows, there's so many different things. And so, you want to be aware of that and be empathetic to that and be flexible, making sure that the engineer's machine arrived on time, right? Like, like make sure the mail got it there.
We've dealt with that ourselves, especially with even some of the most recent like snowstorms and stuff like that. You have all these plans for people starting, and I can't even give you access to this because your machine hasn't even arrived on time. It's always and people are more understanding now because
totally
how things. It's not like they take it personally, but it still doesn't feel as good. You don't have that same warm and fuzzy of like, I'm starting with Netflix today. I posted about it. Oh, my machine didn't show up. I can't do anything. It's like it's just a different vibe, right? So.
So let's throw up another. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, and like,
so I don't keep going.
Okay, yeah, go for the question.
So Ryan, what is your philosophy on evaluating, selecting, and promoting new tools? And it's funny that Danny asked this because this is the exact question that Jake, or a very similar question that Jake was going to ask as well. Danny is so quick backstory. Danny is my former guitar player and the band I played in my hometown, and is now a data scientist up in upstate New York. So Danny, great question, big dog. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. How do you promote and build tools? Well, this is a good question that I'm like, I don't know if I have like a perfect rubric for, but I will talk you through my thinking on that. It's super important that sometimes we'll build too, right? Like sometimes internally, like we're building a solution that is unique to like our services. If you know Netflix, it's a lot of microservices. And so how do you deal with that? And yeah, like there might be a tool off the shelf that works, but there's trade-offs. And so really it's evaluating all those things is like, do we create something to solve this need? What's available? And literally almost sometimes writing up a bit of a like memo or doc that's like outlining the pros and cons across these options and trying to like bring people along that journey. I might be that informed captain to decide, but I also want to get input from others because there's definitely things I'm not thinking about. And so someone from security might be like, well, this one has a lot of holes, or like, we're going to have to change a lot of additional services to make this one work. And so you're trying to really gather as much information as possible to make an informed decision. But even the best, so even after making your decision, you found the best tool that's going to work for, this is perfect, right? That always happens. How do you get people on board, right? Like, the best product is great and does the thing, but if nobody uses it and adopts it, who cares? Like, right? Like, you could have the best product, if no one uses it, it doesn't really matter. And so you also have to figure out like what is right for, I'm thinking in my new role too, is like, what's right for my users and customers, which are all the engineers across Netflix. What are they like, what's going to work right for them? And like, how do I also get them, maybe it's not perfect for them, like, because you're trying to solve the needs for maybe a large group of people. And it's like, how do you get them to start using and adopting it, making sure that they're educated on it? It's like, make sure that the material's there and that we also have support for them too. Like, you're not just throwing it out there and be like, we've solved your needs, bye-bye. It's like, how do we make sure that we are there to help too?
I love that. And go ahead, Dan.
Ryan, how do you prioritize business needs, right? Because I would imagine that you guys have a lot of people that consistently reach out to you to build this thing or build that thing. And I'm sure it's coming from high-level executives and people that always want to make their priority your number one priority. How do you guys go about at Netflix or on your team, or just your methodology of determining priority amongst, competing business leaders?
Well, I'll start by saying I don't feel like it's coming top down. Like it's not. Yeah, that's one thing is like I don't have, my VP of engineering come down and say, this is the direction you need to go do X, Y, and Z. They might set a higher level vision of like, where should we be going as an org, or, investing in, but it's pretty vague, which is awesome. I think that's great, because then now myself and my team is like, where do we fit in there? Like, what our charter of like what our team owns and operates around, like, where does it fit in there? And so that's like for us to think about, but it's I'm not going to get instructions. That's for sure. Is like, here, Ryan, you just make sure your team does these things. It's like, that's wrong. It's not going to work. So there's not that, we don't have that part of it, but there's a lot of things, like I've often said many times, I could probably double, triple my team and we'd still be doing really, like, we'd still be busy and we'd still be doing impactful work. We run fairly lean. And so when you do that, you have to prioritize. You have to say, like, we have these 10 things on our plate. We can only do 3, or, it's maybe not that perfect to just say like a number to it, but it's like, what are the most impactful things? Like, what's going to get us the most for the company? What's the most important thing? And so like, if I'm trying to build out a tool, it might be that this unlocks like all these other things for the goals of the company. But you have to think about those things. And it goes back to like discussing and planning around that and making sure that you're all, okay, yes, that makes a lot of sense. And all right, well, what does that mean for those other 7 priorities? Because someone's probably going to be unhappy that they didn't get what they were getting. And so you got to make sure that they understand that too. Is like, I might have another PM or customer or engineering team. And it's like, here's why we aren't able to get to that. Here's the plan forward. We'll get to that, 2 or 3 quarters from now, but here's why we're not able to do it now. And you're explaining the business reason, like the impact of the business. And more often than not, people are like, oh, I mean, that I wish we could have it, but like, I get, like, because they're bought into like the goal and impact for the company too.
How often do you just like this would be like a percentage question. How often do you have like a buy versus build if you're selecting tools for you guys? And how do you decide? Yeah, you can drop my later question if it's too long.
No, and I don't know if I have a answer for that. Like whether it's, I feel like as a coming into Netflix and being newer to it like a long time ago, like I feel like I probably lean more to build because some of the things that we were trying to do just didn't exist.
Yeah.
But I think, the tools around us have grown too. And so I think now you might be evaluating more of like buyer builds. But I don't know what the percentage is. It's like you kind of still should do that rubric, do your due diligence of looking into like what's available, like what do you get for buying. There's some pros to it, is like you don't have to spend the time building it, but it's not even a money thing. It's like literally like, well, does it do all the things that you need? And, what's the support like? And what's, what if we need something changed? Are they willing to do that?
Yeah.
I love that. So Ryan, question that I know I'm sure gets asked a lot to you. And what is the interview process like? What is the interview process like for you and your team specifically, and kind of how you conduct interviews? Because I'm sure a lot of people want to know.
Yeah, and I love that in the question whiteboarding is in there too, because like, I mean, come on, as engineers, we often feel like I've done them. There's been some like, I've been asked to do some wild algorithms on a whiteboard, and it's, most of my background I've done some like back end, but most of my background as an engineer is fairly heavy on the front end, which algorithms like just don't play as much of a part in that. And so I have had to answer those questions, and I've done a okay job at it, but it's not perfect, but it's also not my day-to-day. So I guess what I'm getting at for me when I'm evaluating, especially when I'm hiring like the UI engineer for, especially my last role, which was all basically hiring UI engineers, it's really trying to ask questions of what are they going to do on the job? And so, yes, we might do a whiteboarding exercise. It's really collaborative. It's more like, hey, let's build like autocomplete search, or who knows, like just like let's build a component. And it's pretty vague, but it's like, how do we do that? And it's a back and forth, like, well, what are you searching? Like what, how should this work? And you're kind of talking through that together, but it's not throwing them into some weird pattern that they're not used to. It's literally like, how would you do that? And then how would you think about performance? Like what are some pitfalls to that solution? And kind of just talking through it as you normally would do on the job. It's not really meant to throw some weird technical question out there that throws them off. Now, if you're writing algorithms, like in which we have algorithm teams at Netflix, I'm pretty sure their technical interview has some algorithms in it. And so it really depends on the role. And I can speak to like how I've interviewed and how my thinking around that, but there's no set process, right? Like each team may be different. But I have seen that a lot of the teams I've worked with throughout my time there, they're not trying to stump people. They're not throwing things out there that are just like abstracted from what they do on a daily job, because that's what we're trying to evaluate. To be honest, me asking an algorithm question or a deep fundamental CS thing, I'm like, cool, they can study computer science. That's great, but it didn't really tell me if they can do the job. And so that's been my mindset when I'm interviewing. And that's a cool thing too, freedom, responsibility. I get to also own how I interview, right? Like my job is to build a high performing, really great team. And how do I make sure that I'm doing that and evaluating people?
I love that. And one question from Andrew: favorite front end tool so far in 2021, or just something you guys are pretty hot on right now?
Wow, that's a good one.
We only hang out with people who ask good questions, Ryan. If you
and I mean, my head goes like, I'm like, what's the latest and greatest 2021 tool?
jQuery's back, baby.
You didn't hear? It's like the hot new thing. I think like what I've seen, and this is not a hot new thing, absolutely not. Even Jake had alluded to that. We used to work at at Evernote before Netflix. TypeScript, I'm seeing a lot more of that leverage throughout the company. So it's just been one of those things that's been around for a long time, which is great. But you also sometimes don't want to jump on the bandwagon too early. You want to make sure that things are running well. But that wasn't necessarily the case here. It's also just like, is this the right thing for our teams? And so I've even seen last year this started, but like similar to how I talked about like a proposal is like, there was a woman on my team that was said like, I think we should be adopting TypeScript in our web code base, and here's why. And she had like this whole proposal of all the pros and cons and getting buy-in from the team. And she was that informed captain. And she was like, this is what we're going to get from it. Here's the hurdles. She had a plan for how we would get there. Cause right, like it's not just like turn on a switch and like our code base is now lit up.
It's all strongly typed.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and she had to bring people along that journey. There was definitely engineers on my team that I was like, yeah, you should go talk to them. You know, find your people that are like stoked on the idea that they're going to jump on board. But also go talk to those people who are like concerned about it. They don't want it. They're like, you know, they're cautious of it.
Yeah.
Use them to your advantage too, is understand their concerns, because now you're going to do your research and figure out like how you can maybe think about their concern and maybe address it or not address it and say like, hey, you know, we can't really fix that. That is going to be a problem. Here's how I'm thinking about that. But I think all the benefits outweigh that con.
That informed captain approach is so cool. Like just that alone, because if it's not defined, oftentimes that person will end up being looked at as like a jerk or overachiever or like what in another organization. But the fact that it's encouraged is, oh man, they're bringing something for the team, for the good of the team, for the company, and they've done their research and now they're ready to drive the initiative. People recognize it now. That's so cool. Yeah.
So Ryan, we have hit our time. I want to ask one more question, and then I will let you. By the way, best latte I've ever had was Sightglass Coffee in San Francisco.
Oh, Sightglass is great.
Dude,
yes.
They have a vanilla paste latte, and it's not sweet, and it was the best. So shout out Sightglass if you're watching.
They don't sponsor this podcast, so don't shout them out too much.
Yes.
Yeah. So Ryan, as last question, first off, how can people reach you right after this? Any more questions or whatnot? Twitter, I know Twitter's kind of your big thing. So how can people reach you? And then final question for people who are watching, for people that will watch this after we end it down the road, what is one tangible piece of advice you have for leaders in tech?
All right. So you can find me on Twitter, like you said. I'm at Burgess D. Ryan. So my last name, initial, and then first name. And you can check out Front End Happy Hour podcast. Really, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, it's pretty much available, but you can check it out at frontendhappyhour.com. You can also follow Front End Happy Hour on Twitter at frontendhh. And piece of advice for leaders, ask questions. Like I think too often times we approach it thinking that we have an answer, and you might, that's great. But do your asking questions, like really understand the problems and dig in on things. I think don't necessarily just approach it of like giving a solution. Sometimes people come to the solution themselves too, which is really helpful. And it goes back to that like rewarding ownership and like how the Netflix culture is like, you know, help lead people to a decision. Don't necessarily dictate a decision.
Love that. Goodness gracious, Ryan, dude, thank you again for hanging out with us. This was the most fun a man should have in 45 minutes.
That's right.
I'm thankful. I feel so bad like starting out, like where it was like, oh yeah, I'll just like pop open the computer and like what doesn't work? Video of the guy from Netflix. I'm like, cool, yeah, that's how we're gonna start this thing.
I was dying. I was dying.
So like so professional of that. Like I'm like, oh man, like.
Hey,
you know, but this is our world.
StreamYard. So,
but this is why we do live, because like we talked about it too. Like us three just wanted to hang out with people, like we were hanging out in person. Yeah. So like the fact your video didn't work, like you know what, we just went live and shot the shit and just hung out and then waited for you to get on. So again, thank you for hanging out, man. We really appreciate it.
It's awesome.
Well, thanks for having me. It was really great being on. Always a pleasure. Just, you know, like I said, just talking things, like it's great. So hopefully it was helpful for your listeners. Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Hey,
Awesome.
Ryan, who should we have on next?
Well, I saw you had Kelly on next, right?
Yeah, we have Kelly on next.
Yeah, I was like, so you're talking, you had a good 45 minutes with me. I'm like, wow. Yeah, luckily I got to go first. She's going to come in like, she'll be great. So I'm excited to maybe be a listener on that side. But I mean, I could go on for hours on like people that you need to talk to. Maybe we'll go offline. I can give you.
There you go. Yeah, we'll get Reed's number.
Appreciate that.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know if I can help you there. I'm not sure that I can do that.
Just put in a favor.
I can get you some great people, but I don't know if Reed. He's a busy man.
Same. So we'll see if he can work into our calendar.
Yeah, we're in high demand. Awesome, man.
All right. Well, thanks, Ryan. We appreciate it so much. Thank you again, listeners, viewers, for watching. And we'll see y'all next week at 10 a.m. And we'll send out an invite to everybody as well. So thank y'all again. Appreciate it, Ryan. Thank you so much. Have a great day, buddy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.